You know, I didn't think we'd jump straight to the ridiculous stuff. Maybe we do a few difficult, but overall tame runs, establish some baseline strategies, and then look into the more outlandish things. But sure enough, third proper video in the series, and here we are. As I write this, I'm not even sure if it'll be possible to complete the game, so let's begin and at least see how far we can get. But first, what the heck is even going on here? In Caves of Qud, there is a mechanic for bringing life to inanimate objects, simply by using either the Spray Brain or Nano-Neuro Animator items. Not everything can be animated, but there is quite a sizable list of objects that can. Once animated, an object receives limbs, stats, faction status, essentially becoming an NPC. One practical use in normal playthroughs is to animate a wall or a door, which often have extremely high HP, and recruit them as a follower, as once animated, they can be persuaded just like any other NPC. Among the more interesting, though perhaps less practical, animatable objects are the various vents that serve as traps in dungeons, and specifically for this run, the steaming vents. Like last time, we pick a throwaway starting character, and we swap into an animated steaming vent just outside of town, wishing in the vent and the required Spray Brain, and we begin the run. Steaming vents, like all animated objects, start at level 1. They start with an incredible 500 HP and 50 armor value. All stats are an even 16 across the board, which gives no modifiers, but I'll gladly take this over negative modifiers. We also start with a negative 14 dodge value, but have more than enough HP and AV to compensate. Also, for some strange reason, our move speed is being modified from 100 down to 70. I can't find any effects that would cause this, but I'll headcanon it and say that this is probably because our weight is 25,000 pounds. An interesting, but otherwise insignificant stat. Steaming vents have limbs analogous to a humanoid, with the exception of a face slot. Though the steaming vents start with no abilities or mutations, there is of course their main feature, shooting a jet of flames every turn or so. I don't know the exact calculation, it seems to take the move speed and quickness stats into account, but it averages a stream every 1 to 2 turns. What this means is pretty much every time we take a step, we shoot out a stream of fire, 6 tiles in every cardinal direction. If we hit an NPC with these flames, it will deal about 20 damage. This damage can never be increased or modified, but it will be lessened if the defender has heat resistance. For example, Dawn Gliders take no damage from the flame jets as they have 100% heat resist. For most enemies though, this is a nice extra bit of damage. The fire can even hit flying enemies. The problem is, it also damages friendly NPCs, and believe it or not, counts as an aggressive attack. Imagine entering a village and needing to talk to all the NPCs. You somehow need to navigate through all the residents, the vendors, the leaders, quest givers, etc., without burning everything and everyone to the ground. With careful movement, you might be able to approach 1 or 2 of them, but we're definitely going to need a way around this little issue. I opt to avoid going to town for now, and instead decide to venture into the canyons looking for loot from Snapjaws. They don't drop great loot, but they consistently drop gear. It is so satisfying to incinerate everything simply by moving around. But there is an issue. We're not getting any XP for kills. See, the jet flames have some interesting properties. If I kill an enemy myself, such as with a melee attack, I get XP, but if an enemy is killed directly by contact with a flame, it does not count for the purposes of gaining XP. Though if an enemy is set on fire from my flames and dies from burning damage, as opposed to direct contact, I will receive the XP. So with a bit of managing my movement, I somehow get enough XP to buy Fasting Way and learn Make Camp. Finally a run where I can actually learn Make Camp right away. To my surprise, I happen upon the Stops Valen, as the pop-up tells me. So I find the legendary Snapjaw and take from it, Stops Valen, a unique shield that generates a force wall on use. But for now, we don't have a way to keep it powered for very long. I also discover another property of the flame jets. In the same way that XP isn't granted from direct flame death, reputation loss and gain also isn't recognized when killing a legendary creature. This could potentially be very useful. I next happen upon a pack of Putus Templar. I take them all out and get some really good loot, including 2 Eater's Nectar Injectors, a portable wall, and a bunch of Fullerite gear. I leave the armor behind as we don't really need AV and it's extremely heavy, but I do equip the Fullerite longsword. After that encounter, I realize that I'm probably strong enough to take on goatfolk villages, so I head off to the jungle. Yeah, it's going to be that kind of run, where we're farming goats at level 5. As expected, I face no issues here, and I'm quickly loaded up on carbide stuff to sell. I realize I can buy a mutation, so wow. Force Bubble would be great when we need to turn off the flames, which would allow us to get close to something without destroying it, but I have something else planned for that. I'm not going to pass Domination up, as that might make some things easier. I also decide down a melee path. Two-handed cudgels with single weapon fighting sounds good for this run. I also spend my attribute point on intelligence for a bit more skill points. I've been building up a book collection, so I head to the 6-day stilt to see if I can possibly make my way to Sheba. The most direct path is littered with NPCs that I could probably take out but really don't want to, so I sneak in the side way, and since I haven't found a pickaxe yet, I use the Skulk Injector I found to tear down the walls and am able to make it in without harming Sheba, who is a musket turret this time. Not quite enough books to level up, so I go into the desert to take out a few enemies. There are several issues making leveling up difficult. Most enemies tend to stupidly walk right into the flames, dying before they get into melee range. Goats will usually survive long enough to get meleeed, even if they do walk into the flames, but I don't have the int or skill points for jungle lore yet, so I have to wander around the jungle getting lost, hoping to find villages, which is time inefficient. I turn the difficulty threshold for ignoring hostile creatures to tough, usually a very stupid idea for normal playthroughs, and just comb the desert for ruins, hoping to find books. I have to avoid Dawn Gliders, as without a good projectile weapon, I can't take them out fast enough before they can whittle down my HP. Outrunning them isn't possible with our low movement speed. I stupidly equip the magnetized boots, the only boots I found so far, and go way too long without realizing that they decrease move speed by another 5 points before removing them. I find another pack of Templar and 2 more Eater's Injectors, this time both giving mutation points. At this point, I realize that I need to take a step back and figure out what I really need. I've kind of just been wasting time running around burninating the countryside, but can you blame me? How often do you get to just do this in runs? Anyway, XP is needed badly. I need attribute and skill points. As much as I hate it and was hoping I wouldn't have to do it in this run, I take the safest, fastest, and most tedious method of farming early XP, books in the desert. I do grab a rifle, but since I have limited options for talking to traders, I have to trade with Sheba, who as a gun turret has some bullets to trade. 2 ruins later, I find a bunch of rifle turrets who drop even more slugs on death. With this, I now have a way to deal with Dawn Gliders, making the desert farming just a little less annoying. I find yet another Templar pack, and again, they're carrying an Eater's Injector. This time it gives me a mutation point, which gives 4 total, so time to buy a new mutation, and yes, double muscled. It could not have come at a much better time. Definitely want that +2 strength to help with our pin. I decide to take a detour to visit a historic site, as I feel items will be important to this run, and historic sites have a chance for some good ones. The closest one I found is in the groves just above Ezra. On the surface alone, I find an artifact laser pistol, which grants level 5 clairvoyance, a Golgotha recoiler with a full thermoelectric cell, which I swap into the laser pistol, the location of another historic site, and 3 legendary king crabs, 2 of which have only positive rep to gain from killing, save for their historic clan faction, which I don't care about. I make sure to position them on a diagonal direction while fighting, that way my flames don't kill them and rob me of the XP and rep gain. On the first stratum down, I find 2 more good faction king crabs, an upgrade to my weapon in the form of a 2-handed Fullerite maul, and a pair of helping hands. Though for this run, I think I'm going to stay committed to my single weapon fighting and use the helping hands to, well, just help. I was already facing over-encumbrance issues, having had to drop my hover sled for a floating glow sphere to see underground. With the helping hands, I can offhand a regular glow sphere and re-equip my hover sled for the increased carry weight. Would you believe that on the next floor down we see 5 more of these good rep king crabs? It's like stumbling into a Schrodinger page factory. And on killing the 4th one, we get a chance to rapidly advance a mutation with the option to buy one first. So I take that option, and multiple arms? I guess the game really wants me to go multi-weapon fighting. Not to mention, these crabs are dropping good gear, including a pair of bounding boots, which give a much needed plus 15 to move speed. I go down 4 more levels after this and fight close to 20 more of these crabs, if not more. There are 2 relic chests here, one containing a sword and the other containing a shield, which both grant electrical generation at level 5. After clearing the last floor, I leave the historic site, now a steaming vent with 6 arms that can shoot lightning, who is respected by several factions throughout the world who had been enemies of the king crabs of the Electric Shade kinfolk. Taking stock of our loot, there's the Helping Hands and Clairvoyant Laser Gun, along with a bunch of high-value loot that we can sell. There's also the sword and shield, which gives us discharge, doing great damage at level 10, but also the ability to power devices, which can be huge once we get tinkering. The bottle of polygel was also a nice find. We went in at level 12 and are now level 20. I was a little worried that this visit wouldn't pay off, but man, am I glad I went. Back to town to turn in the books and bits of Resha lore I'd found, and I have more than enough mutation points to buy another mutation. Heightened quickness will definitely help with our movement speed. I also spec into multi-weapon fighting. Thankfully, we haven't wasted any points, as before, when I wanted to go single-weapon fighting, I didn't even have enough skill points to invest in it. I had also found 3 Fullerite Mauls and 2 Carbide Wrist Blades in the historic site, so I equipped them. Considering how well the last site went, I decided to check out one of the others that I'd found. There's one close to the last one, but this isn't as ideal. The enemies here mostly consist of Asphodelites, which do electrical damage. I'm pretty sure elemental damage ignores AV, one of the reasons why our own flames are so deadly. There are also twinning lampreys here, whose damage is calculated using our MA rather than AV. These are both very bad types of damage for us. It's mostly fine, I just have to stop and heal often, which actually looks pretty cool. The lampreys are a bit annoying as you have to kill both at the same time, else they continuously regenerate, and they tend not to stand in a line in which I can incinerate them, or when they do, they're off cycle where one dies and one respawns in the same turn. None of these enemies really drop good loot either, but there aren't too many lampreys and I'm able to pretty easily clear the site, and our reward is a Relic Eater's Nectar Injector, an insanely good find, but it doesn't help at the moment. I'm hoping to find a somewhat specific but common item, and it has a good possibility of spawning as dungeon loot, so why not check out another historic site? There's one in the Rainbow Wood, but I don't feel like getting lost yet, so I go to the one in the deep jungle. On the surface, there are a lot of stat saps, but with such a high AV, their attacks will never penetrate, so they're harmless. There is a Galgal here, so I have to be a little careful, but am able to best it. Inside, it's mostly more saps. Stratum 3 is inhabited by Glittermensch, who drop precious gemstones on death. Stratum 4, we find our first relic, a nice pair of gloves, and Stratum 6, our final relic, is this short blade with an insane 24% chance to dismember mod, an almost max roll on a super rare relic mod. We've earned another 4 mutation points, so we roll for another one, and so Temporal Fugue would be pretty fun, but I think the Friendly Fire would be too harmful, and since my ego bonus isn't really good enough for ego projection, I take Stinger, another weapon for our multi-weapon setup. I also decide to offhand our new Relic Dagger in one of my Robo Hands and spec into the Short Blade tree a bit for more attack chance. I still need to procrastinate, so I decide to now do the Rainbow Wood historic site. On the surface, it looks similar to the first site with more of those legendary crabs all over, but this time some soupy sludges are sprinkled in. And inside, it's more of the same. In addition to the good loot and rep that the crabs have, even at level 24, they're still granting excellent experience. And with Dismember, I can grab some +2 faces, even though we can't wear them, at least not yet. Eventually I just stopped checking their rep and trying to carefully take them out, as it's very slow, and just trying to manually kill as many as I can, as like 90% so far have only had good rep. The final relic is interesting, but this really isn't a follower-friendly run. Once again, back to town with a ton of lore to turn in and a few books. I decide to go for another mutation, and since we already have clairvoyance on an item and disintegration has only ever killed me, I take the +2 agility. I also get the next level of multi-weapon fighting. I'm thinking of switching to short blades, but I want to find more polygel to dupe the Dismember relic first. And to do that quickly, we need to be able to talk to vendors, which is still kind of a problem. We have the location of 3 more historic sites, all in beginner areas. To quickly summarize, the first site is in the flower fields, and it had Nepthali. Normally, you wouldn't want to kill the godheads that spawn with them, as you'd incur robot rep loss, which is really bad. But since these are of a historic site faction, they instead give rep more similar to what the crabs we've seen were giving. The second site, in the Desert Canyons, had musket turrets, of all things, and a ton of books. And the third site was kind of a mixed bag of enemies, nothing challenging though. Sadly, none of the relics were anything special. As usual, I return to town, turn in the bits of lore and books, and we make it to level 29. I still haven't found the item I'm looking for, so I guess I'll have to come up with something else if I want to progress further without grinding. My idea involves a specific piece of gear, and farming for specific items in Qud doesn't always go well. I believe it's an item that can be sold by tinkers, and Bep is probably the best one in the game. I'm able to easily make it to the freehold at this point, and I'm high enough level to always dominate Bep and Tilly, the other high-level trader here. Dealing with the flames makes this a little tricky, so I come to town from above, then relocate Bep and Tilly using Dominate. Moving Bep goes off without a hitch, but with Tilly, there are some fire-related accidents. I'm able to get her out and bring them both 1 tile north of town, and here I am farming these guys on another run. I was hoping I wouldn't have to, one of the reasons why I did so many historic sites, but alas. I farm for a while and am able to craft a radio-powered antimatter cell, which will let our Stops Valen remain powered for quite a long time. When activated, this creates a force field wall, which blocks both incoming attacks and outgoing flame jets in one direction of our choosing. This makes navigating populated areas a bit better, but it's still not really viable. I try to bring in Ural to my farming area, as the item I'm looking for is actually a mid-level item, and Ural tends to carry mid-level equipment. I simply drop my freehold recoiler, dominate, then have Ural pick up the recoiler and move into position, and then I just walk back. Except, Ural likes to wander into town, and the freehold is absolutely crowded with NPC kindlings. So I just continue farming Bep. After almost 2 hours of farming, I still haven't seen the item. And at this point, I break down and look the item up on the wiki. And of course, there's a, quote, guaranteed way to find it. First, we need to trade secrets with some trolls. There are, of course, 3 legendary trolls in Bethesda Susa, so I head there. We've gained enough rep from fighting crabs to give them neutral rep, but of course, Jotun is still aggressive. Our ego is decent, and trolls aren't the most mentally strong. I consider learning proselytize, but don't quite have the ego requirement, so instead decide on a much more reliable strategy. I take the cooking and gathering skill and make a campsite right outside the troll's lair. I've so far found 1 love injector, which can be preserved into 5 congealed loves, which then can be cooked to give us a chance at learning, temporarily, Beguile Creature. I cook until I get Beguile, enter the lair, activate Stops Valen to block his throwing axes, but I'm not sure if I'm in any real danger from them with my AV now at 60. Beguile works first try, and now we can not only water bond and gain some more rep, but also simply have him give us the key to the next floor. The next troll is basically the same thing. Beguile, get rep, get key, move on. The last troll gave me a bit of an issue as usual. Hagaba is invisible, though you can find him using the minimap. I'm able to beguile him this way, but can't actually talk to him. I realize that our clairvoyance skill actually allows us to see him, which will save me having to go back and grab my night vision goggles. I realized much later that this wouldn't have worked anyway, as we don't have a face on which to put them. Anyway, we finally get enough rep to start trading for secrets, and the secrets that they tell I believe are random, but they do have a high chance of telling the location of Kindrish, which Hagaba does tell us about. So I head straight to the location of Kindrish on the map and clear it out, and of course, it's not there. Now this item will always be in the center parasang, but it could be up to 9 floors down. I do know how to craft spiral borers, one of the many recipes I've gotten from Bep, but I had also taken one from his inventory and stashed it away, and since we're close to the base, I head back and grab it. The spiral borer is a tool that will dig 20 stratus straight down wherever you use it. We don't need to go quite that deep, however. I clear out everything up to stratum 9, but I get a little worried after not seeing Kindrish. There's a chance the item could spawn in a chest, but I had checked every chest and nothing. So on the way back up, I check every corpse and pile of ashes, as there's also a chance that it can spawn on any random enemy. I tried to keep an eye out, but I was just going so fast that I had missed it did in fact drop from an enemy on the 5th stratum. And now we have Kindrish. What's so great about it? Well, the bracelet itself means little for our purposes. It has an interesting property of raising your lowest attribute by 3 points, but what makes it so special for this run is the fact that we can trade it to the Hindran of Bela. And in return for recovering their precious artifact, we're rewarded a Force Bracelet. Yes, this is our god item. This is what I've been trying to find for pretty much the entire run, a mid-tier artifact that many runs will find randomly before level 10. When activated, it surrounds the user with a force field. Unlike Stops Valen's single direction force wall, this will stop attacks and flames in all directions. And with the radio-powered antimatter cell, we can keep our force wall up for quite a while before it runs out of juice. Now, it's not quite perfect, as we still have to turn it off to get close enough to actually interact with an NPC, unless of course we trap them against a wall, which isn't always ideal. Also, the battery doesn't last forever, so we have to act quickly, but this is enough to start getting quests done. I head back to the starting village and complete the first quest to unlock the Grit Gate quest. Getting through Grit Gate and Golgotha goes generally gravy, but after realizing just how short of a time the Force Bracelet actually lasts with almost the best cell in the game, I take a small detour to find an item that might actually fix that issue. I start farming Bep and Tilly again. This time I'm also trying to get polygel from Tilly and enough bits from both of them to craft a certain pair of gloves, as I have some ideas cooking for a new build. Crafting these gloves requires Tinker 3, which I don't have, but I can have Bep disassemble items for the bits so he can craft them for me whilst dominated. I'm able to craft 3 pairs, one for each glove slot that we currently have, and get radio-powered antimatter cells for all of them. And in the meantime, we also find the Jacked Mod data disk. These few simple items should take our build to the next level, so let's test them out. First, we polygel our Relic Dismember short blade to duplicate it a few times for a total of 4 blades. Next, we equip the Precision Nanan Fingers, gloves which increase percentage-based effects by 3. This affects stacks as well. Even though I made 3 with only 1 pair, the dismember chance of our Relic short blades becomes 72%, and with 2 maxes out at 100%, which leaves us with a free glove slot. I equip the blades in my main hands, so now we attack with 4 short blades with 100% chance to dismember each. We have 2 more slots in which to equip weapons, which leave potential for increased damage, but I don't feel like farming more polygel, and at least one hand needs to be holding an electrical generation relic for our other new toy, the Force Bracelet, now modded to be jacked. The Jacked mod allows items to be powered from sources of electrical generation, such as the electrical generation mutation, which we've been granted by the aforementioned relic. With only level 5 generation, our force wall has 100% uptime without the need to even install a cell. This is what I like to call permabubble, and although there are a few ways enemies can best a force wall, such as with EMP grenades or Templars with the Force Modular implant, we're invincible to most conventional attacks. This, combined with our new short blades, is probably one of the craziest builds I've ever seen, and I would absolutely love to play this on a more traditional character. The downside is that it took a lot of farming to get all the gear, and we don't really need the permabubble, but it will make things a lot easier. If our stats were better, we could make this build even crazier, but for now, we're more than ready. I do a quick test on some goats in the jungle, and yeah, with permabubble up, they can't even touch us, and with it off, whatever doesn't get burned gets all of its limbs chopped off, and then gets burned. Let's see what this build can do. Our first stop is Bethesda Susa. The only issue is, again, the lampreys for the same reason as before. Of course, the mechanimists aren't too happy with me, so I have to kill all of them. No other choice. I level up here and decide to spec into the axe line, taking Dismember, which allows me to take Decapitate, though I'm not sure if it works with other weapons, so I check every one that I kill to see if I chopped off their head. Decapitate is an insta-kill if it procs. I don't claim any heads here, but I do chop off 5 limbs in one hit on one enemy. Poor guy. Next is the Grit Gate battle, and it's pretty unremarkable, but I did learn a few things. Apparently, EMP grenades can also stop the jet streams of a steaming vent. It's only for a few turns, however, and I don't think that information would have been too useful earlier in the run. I'm also starting to think that Decapitate in fact does not apply to non-axe weapons, as I've yet to chop off even one head. The Rainbow Wood is a breeze to navigate with the Perma Bubble, as we can push Spore Puffs out of the way without having to worry about getting covered in spores. Pax is hostile again for this run, but this time, I just Love Injector him and continue on. Why didn't I just do this in my Salt Hopper run? Anyway, we move right along to the Tomb of Eaters, opting as usual to forego the Mark of Death. The tomb is relatively uneventful. I take more damage from traps than anything, saying hi to my steaming vent brethren as I pass. The crypts are pretty easily navigated as well. As an added bonus of the Perma Bubble, most melee enemies don't even attempt to approach me. Of course, that bit of luck runs out in the Sultan tombs, as the Astral Friction makes the Force Bracelet essentially useless. So I just see if I can fight all the cherubim, and I'm able to take them all out without even taking damage. So I decide, why not see if we can just kill all of them? That'll provide maybe a bit of extra challenge, and we can see if there are any more good relic items which sometimes spawn in the Sultan Reliquaries. On the second floor, we actually do get a Decapitate proc, so theory confirmed it does indeed work with other weapons. Sadly, none of the cherubim are even a challenge, and I did have to backtrack because the best items spawned with the Kessel face on the first floor, and I was too lazy to make a recoiler. The blade is actually very good. It's a Zetachrome short blade that grants level 8 teleportation. This is an excellent upgrade, as I was actually still using an old Fullerite Maul in my 5th offhand. Equipping this blade gives us just enough mutation levels to get into very low Glimmer, but I don't think it'll be an issue. Of course, we also get the Kessel face, but we still don't have a face slot. If I really wanted to, I could farm Bep for the two-faced mod, which ironically would only give us one face to work with, but I don't think we need it. At the top, I have to be careful to move out of the way so I don't burn Herodoticus. I go to tattoo myself, and of course, I can't tattoo myself. However, I'm ready this time, but I do make a few mistakes. If you saw my Salt Hopper run, you may remember that I couldn't tattoo myself then either, and did all kinds of convoluted experiments to ultimately end in failure. Some people pointed out that I need a Gaslight weapon, which is true, but one person nailed the answer down exactly. While you can't actually tattoo or engrave a Salt Hopper, you can use a Gaslight Chisel to engrave the Robo Limbs granted from Helping Hands. I came back on a test Salt Hopper save later and tried it, and it worked, though I didn't test if you could entomb yourself afterwards. For this run, we need a Gaslight Chisel, which will allow us to engrave ourselves. But we're not limited to just our Robo Limbs. We can engrave any part of our body. I didn't realize that it had to be a chisel. I thought any Gaslight weapon would work. Again, I don't have any programmable recoilers, even though I know the recipe, my level is too low, and I'd have to dominate Bep to make them for me. So I ended up recoiling back to my base, knowing that I have some Gaslight weapons stashed away, and that even though I would have to walk all the way back through the Tomb of Eaters, it would be worth it. I shortly realized that the Gaslight Flysa and Gaslight Chris don't actually give the option to engrave, so we need a chisel. Whenever I find myself wondering just how the hell am I going to find such a specific item, I first refer to the wiki, and sure enough, Herodoticus carries a Gaslight Chisel. So I walk all the way back through the tomb, a wasted trip. And technically it's double backtracking because I also had to go back to get the Kessel face the first time. Once again, at the top, I attempt to trade with Hero, but they don't offer anything. I attempt to dominate, but he's a robot. I do have a ganglionic teleprojector back at the base, but I'll be danged if I'm walking all the way back again. You know, you could have made things a lot easier for the both of us. I take the chisel, equip it, and, for the sake of testing, engrave only a robo-hand. And it works. I can entomb myself, talk to Mr. Rainwater, then recom to Qud. I make one quick stop to turn in what has to be the last of the Reshef lore I've been accumulating, and it's enough for 2 more levels. In the interest of making this build as crazy as possible, I take another mutation and... oh, there's Force Bubble again. Though I don't actually think we'd be able to perma-bubble with the mutation version, at least not with this build, so I take Regeneration instead. Our next task is constructing the golem, and while this has so far been useful in the other more challenging runs, for this one it's not really needed. I just slapped something together here. The hardest part to get was the level 30 follower, as we don't really have great persuasion skills. I tried to get a plasma gel, but it's not possible with cooked beguile, I guess, so I go for a Kaleido slug instead. Here are the parts on screen. If you're interested, you'll have to forgive me for not going into as much detail as usual, but yeah, like I said, it's just not as important to this run. And once it's crafted, it does have pretty good strength, but only one weapon. The bigger issue is that the vent weighs so much that the golem can't carry it, so even if we wanted to pilot it, we couldn't, unless we farmed a ridiculous amount of negative weight spheres. We can still tell Barathrum to enter the golem, which is all we need to progress the quest, and then head to Ezra. Before entering the battle, I decide to polygel the Eater's injectors I've been carrying. This gets me a few attribute points and enough mutation points for 2 more mutations. Hey, there's our 2-headed, and now we can equip that Kessel face. And for our last mutation, why not Burrowing Claws? I tell my golem to stay behind and head off to the battle by myself. The first map can have a variety of deadly enemies, but this time we get lucky and there's only a commander and a few of his followers. The Gersh Nephilim spawns to the east as I pass through the village, and while I wish I could say that any of the battles were challenging or interesting, sadly they weren't. The legendary mecha did have a lot of HP though. It was like trying to break down a wall without a pickaxe. Things do get a little more interesting when we come to our Gersh encounter. At first I can't even find it. I can see the rainbow streams it creates, but no Gersh to be found. It looks like it's somewhere in the wall, so I use my new claws to dig around, but still can't find it. Being totally confused, I use the show full map option and it seems to have spawned inside a wall. I know it's Shugruith the Burrower, but this doesn't seem right. I try to free it so we can have a fair fight, and eventually I do. Shugruith is very tanky, and the fight is drawn out, though there's nothing too difficult here. I simply have to hit it, use Flurry as often as I can, and dodge the beam, as although I'm tanky myself, the beam does quite a bit of damage. In only one instance was I put in a position where there were no safe adjacent tiles, and I had to risk a teleport, which didn't work, and so I took a beam to our new face. But beyond that, I just had to pay attention to the beam cycles, and the win was easy. All that's left to do is assemble the spindle, but there's that tiny issue that we need to be piloting the golem to enter, but we weigh too much. With a little bit of positioning, we can get the golem right next to the spindle, then enter. We don't have to move and are close enough to interact and ascend. And that's it. What a wild run. With the HP and AV so high, there was never much of a combat challenge, save for a few one-off creatures. The challenge was mostly in overcoming the uncontrollable flames, but by the time we got there, we were already pretty overpowered. It was lucky to find Stops Fallon so early, but never really got to use it to help because I didn't have a good power source. It was interesting to actually rush through historic sites. I got so insanely lucky with the rep crabs, and especially with the Relic Dismember sword. The electrical generation relics were also a bit of insane luck, as without them the permabubble might not have been possible, without much more investment and or luck. This run taught me a lot of things, some I wish I'd known beforehand, such as the Guaranteed Force Bracelet and the Gaslight Chisel that Herodoticus carries. But for all the good luck I had, it took way more farming than I would have liked to find the Jacked mod. Domination was also useful, but mostly just to speed up the vendor farming process. When I first got the mutation, I considered using it as a strat to dominate a weak villager near the outskirts of towns and have them go in and do all the talking for me. But even this would have been difficult to manage without burning them. I knew the run was going to be wild no matter what, but it ended up being one of the craziest builds I've ever played, and it could have been even crazier. For example, I didn't even have multi-weapon mastery, and I didn't put much effort into armor or mods. It really wasn't needed, as we were already insanely strong, but I would love to have this kind of luck in a regular playthrough. I assume that even without Force Bubble, the run is still pretty doable. A high-level teleport, for example, would help with navigating populated areas. Dominating a steam vent was actually one of the first things I tried when I found out about animating objects in the game. It was fun to mess around with for a bit, but I never thought I'd actually be doing a full playthrough as one, let alone making a video about it. But here we are. And so we send another Qud inhabitant into space. There is of course no oxygen upon which the flames can feed, so perhaps our steaming vent friend can finally turn down the flames and just chill out. Thanks for watching. Live and drink.